Today, I'm going to share with you 6 conversation starters, 6 sales conversation starters that every freight broker and freight agent needs to know. And the reason why this is important, because if you're a new broker or you're new to sales in particular, a lot of people struggle with what they should say. And when they get past how the opening, where do they turn that into a real meaningful, compelling conversation that will help develop rapport and a relationship with your prospect? Now, these conversation starters can happen in a variety of different mediums. The phone is number 1. Email is number 2. And social media is number 3. Those are the 3 primary channels where you can use these strategies and these conversation starters to get the ball rolling. All right. So I'm going to share with you 6 conversation starters. I'm going to share with you a framework of these 6 conversation starters that you can use to start a conversation with virtually anyone. Okay. So I'm going to give these to you in no discernible order, but my favorite, okay, just happens to be a question or a comment related to their LinkedIn profile. So LinkedIn is the world's largest professional networking site. It's a business network. It's kind of like Facebook, but for business. If you're not familiar with it, just go to linkedin.com, check it out. Search for me, linkedin.com/in/Ask Dennis Brown, and you can connect with me personally on LinkedIn. Here's what I'd like to share with you. So a question or something personal about them from their LinkedIn profile. So for example, on their LinkedIn profile, you can see their geography. You can see where they live. You can see their educational history. You can see what LinkedIn groups they belong to. You can see how long they've worked at their current employer, where they worked previously. You can see different social media posts that something they've posted on social media or things that they've engaged with. You can see their interests and hobbies. So it gives you a really strong profile of that individual person as it relates to their business. Now, it does also include some personal stuff in there, but those are examples of things that you can hone in on for specifically for a conversation starter. Again, geography, work history, educational history, things that they're interested in. LinkedIn is one of my favorite places to go before I talk to any prospect, before I send an email to any prospect, before I start doing any real social media engagement with any prospect. I'm going to do a little bit of research, and that almost always starts with their LinkedIn profile. Okay. So using information from their LinkedIn profile as a conversation starter is one of the best ways that I've found to start a conversation. Okay, so that's number 1, using LinkedIn as a conversation starter and the data that you can collect from that. I call that data on their profile sales intelligence. It gives you intelligence, it gives you information, it gives you data that helps to move you towards the sale. So you can leverage that data to enhance your conversation, which will help build rapport and increase the likelihood that you're going to be able to do business with that prospect. So that's number 1, okay? Number 2, questions about a popular piece of content within the customer's industry. So let's say, for example, your niche is the steel industry. So if your niche is the steel industry, you're probably going to be up to date with all of the recent news and information related to the steel industry. So journals, magazines, trade organizations, blogs, podcasts, those are all things related to the steel industry or whatever your niche is, the produce industry, the steel industry, import, export, whatever your niche is, you are going to be educated about that industry. And what you're going to do is you're going to leverage recent news, recent information, or a recent change or piece of content. So for example, say that you're in the steel industry and a new piece of legislation was just passed down from Congress that it will have a positive or a negative impact on the steel industry. Okay. Now, governments do this all the time, right? So they pass legislation and it always has a ripple effect. It either enhances it for the steel industry or it makes it harder. That's a perfect example. Or let's say, for example, there was a major merger between 2 large steel companies or 2 well-known steel companies. If there's a merger, that's a great piece of news. or say there's some new types of products or innovation that is taking place in the steel industry, right? Those are all things that you can use as conversation starters. Why? Because it's relevant, right? Just like the LinkedIn profile is relevant to the prospect, those changes are relevant to the prospect because they work within the steel industry, or again, whatever niche you decide to choose. So that's the first one was using their LinkedIn profile. The second one was questions about a popular piece of content within the customer's industry or the niche that you're pursuing. Another one is a question about a recent event. Okay. So a recent event within that would be relevant to a prospect might be an industry trade show, right? So a trade show that just took place or is going to take place. Or let's say, for example, there was a new product launch, right? A competitor launched a new product, or the company that they work for launched a new product. So those are examples of an event, something that happened, right? Something that's relevant, something that's contextual to that prospect, okay? So you could question about a recent event. That's number 3. Number 4, a comment about something the customer recently did. Now, this is a little bit different. So in order to create a conversation starter around something that the prospect recently did, you're going to have to do some research specific to them. And the best way to do that is using social media. So for example, their Twitter, if they're on Twitter, things that they're posting, liking, or engaging with on LinkedIn, their Facebook profile, right? Instagram, things of that nature. So you can do a little bit of research about the prospect outside of LinkedIn on other social media channels. Now, there's a fine line here where it becomes gathering sales intelligence versus stalking, right? I don't want you to be a stalker, and you have to be careful that you don't get too personal with this type of a starter. But for example, if you notice that on Instagram, they posted a picture about a recent ski trip, that makes for a great conversation starter. Okay. Now, if that's 6 months old, it probably doesn't, unless you maybe it was a year old and now the ski season's here again, you could tie that loop. But ultimately, something on Instagram that's relevant, maybe it was their birthday, maybe they recently just got engaged. You congratulate them on that. I mean, you got to make sure you don't get creepy, but at the same time, you need things that are relevant to your prospect, make great conversation starters. So do a little bit of research about your prospect on other social media channels, and you'll be surprised the open doors that are there for you to knock on and develop a real meaningful conversation, okay? Because again, this is things that you're going to be different than what other salespeople are talking about. Very rarely are salespeople going to have these types of conversations. It's usually very dry. It's usually very self-centered, and it's all about them, and it's never about the prospect. So notice all the conversation starters that I've given you up to this point are about the prospect. It's relevant to them. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with my service. It has nothing to do with my business. It has nothing to do with my customers. It has to do with them, right? That's the most important. You need to make it about them, okay? All right, so that was number 4. Number 5, a question about the customer's job role, okay? So you can see on LinkedIn what their job role is, what they did prior, and what they've done in their prior business experience. So you could talk to them about their current job role. So for example, you could use a question like, so what are your biggest goals for 2022? Right? That's specific to their job. Or what are your biggest what do you see as your biggest challenges in 2022? Right? So what do you enjoy most about your job? What do you enjoy least about your job? Now, you're not going to ask all 4 of those questions. You're not going to, and you don't want this to turn into an interrogation, but those are examples of questions that can start in a meaningful dialogue, and a dialogue that is unusual and different, that is going to allow you to stand out and actually build rapport with that prospect. Okay. So you've heard me say it before, different is better than better. Don't just sound like everybody else. If you sound like everybody else, prepare to get the Heisman, okay? Because that's what you're going to get. You're going to get you're going to get hangups if you sound like everybody else. You need to be different. And these are some ways that you can have interesting and compelling conversation starters that actually work, okay? So that was number 5. Number 6, a question question about a recent announcement from the customer's company. So let's say, for example, in addition to LinkedIn, one of my favorite places to gather sales intelligence and information about a prospect is their company website. So you can go to their company website. You can see recent news. You can see recent articles. You can see recent data and information related to the company, new product releases. A new CEO was hired, new customers, new locations. All of this information, all of the news or information related to the company is very relevant and contextual to that prospect because it's how they get their paycheck, right? So the more you know about the prospect, the more you know about the prospect's company, and the more you know about the prospect's industry, the better off you are. And you can use all of those as great conversation starters, okay? Perfect example, if they had launched a new product, right? You could congratulate them about the launch of this new product and inquire a question and ask a question about it to start a dialogue, right? So that's a perfect example of a relevant contextual sales conversation starter that will actually work, okay? As opposed to begging for freight or asking to quote or telling them your life story about how you're the greatest freight broker, which never works, okay? So those are the 6 sales conversation starters, right? And there are many, many others. And in each one of those 6 categories, there's dozens of different opportunities there. And again, this isn't a 2-hour webinar. This isn't a long training. I wanted to design this to keep this very short, to give you a little bit of a taste and a little bit of a starting point. But those are the 6 points where you can have a great conversation starter for any prospect. And you can use, if you're a freight broker or freight agent, these all apply. Again, I'm going to review them very quickly. Question about something personal on the customer's LinkedIn profile. Number 2, question about a popular piece of content within the customer's industry. Number 3, a question about a recent event. Number 4, a comment about something the customer recently did. Number 5, a question about the customer's job role. And number 6, a question about a recent announcement from the customer's company. Okay, so those are the 6 different buckets where you can go to identify information and data and sales intelligence that will allow you to create a compelling sales conversation starter. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, and you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. We've trained over 10,000 students, been in business over a decade, and we have a 60-day, 100% money back guarantee. It's unconditional. For any reason, you can get your money back. So you can try it for 60 days. And if you're not happy or you decide you're not going to go that direction, just send us an email. We'll refund your money, no questions asked. Totally appreciate you guys being here. Again, no matter where you're listening to this, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for being here, and make sure you tune in next week for another Freight Broker Bootcamp Live.